We are live. So, hello everyone. Welcome on in. Welcome, Justine Barron, to Millennial Splaining. This is a show. It looks very much like the show we were just on, which was the Eclectic Radical Chris Richard show. He's fantastic, and I'm usually his co-host, but this is my show because this is my StreamYard account. So thank you so much for coming on. We had an amazing discussion that day, and I hope that we can continue it. But to begin with, would you like to introduce yourself and talk about your book a little bit, maybe?
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Justine. I just see a weird piece of hair. I wrote a book. It was published last year. I am an investigative journalist, and it's called "They Killed Freddie Gray: The Anatomy of a Police Brutality Cover-Up." So, Freddie Gray was a famous a case of a death in police custody in 2015. There were, massive protests. It was national attention. And I have obtained evidence that was never shared with the public, never shared in court, of how he was really killed and how all these different agencies at the city, state, and federal level covered it up.
That's awesome. I highly recommend. What's the name of the book again?
They Killed Freddie Gray: The Anatomy of a Police Brutality Cover-Up. And there's a foreword written by Rabia Chowdhury, who's famous from the Adnan Syed case. So it should be a surprising read.
Awesome. I'm definitely going to check that book out. I highly recommend all my viewers do as well. And you're a journalist as well. You write for a number of different platforms, right?
Yeah, I freelance. So I've written for different national and local to Baltimore outlets. I'm not in Baltimore now, but I sort of started by covering Baltimore crime and corruption and politics.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a good, that's an interesting place to start for sure. I don't know too much about Baltimore, but I've been there once or twice, so that's interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I have not lived there the most of my adult life. I went to college there. I grew up in Maryland, but I came back when I got into the Freddie Gray case, and then I just became absorbed by the lies and corruption because it was wild to me how this whole city kept operating on this machinery of lies. So
yeah, do you want to talk about that a little more? Just like a brief summary for people who don't know.
Well, I mean, with the Freddie Gray case, one of the things I started by investigating it for Undisclosed Podcast, which was Rabia's podcast. I told you she wrote the foreword. Rabia and some lawyers had started that podcast to investigate Adnan Syed's death. So Adnan Syed was from the Serial podcast, became very famous case that was in Baltimore as well. And there was this podcast Serial that was about that case, but it wasn't. It was entertaining, but it didn't really expose all of the truth about the case, the evidence, and the legal issues. So Rabia and a couple of lawyers launched that podcast, Undisclosed, and it became really an innocence kind of podcast, often in connection with the Innocence Project. Season after season, Undisclosed was trying to free people that were in prison wrongfully. But they gave me and this journalist, Amelia McDonald Perry, one season to look into the Freddie Gray case. And we discovered that pretty much everything the public was told about his death, that it was a rough ride in the van, everything that we were told was a lie. And then eventually, over the years that followed, I obtained enough evidence to really prove that, to make it extremely clear. Because, and what I learned was that the police department lied and covered up, as to be expected, but the prosecutors who tried the officers, who put on a show of wanting justice, were also lying and covering up. And that was led by Marilyn Mosby, who just today, I believe, I have not seen her sentence, but today was sentenced on fraud charges. So that's somebody I've written about a lot too, is Marilyn Mosby. So oh, sorry, I can't hear you. You're muted.
I'm muted. Sorry. Yeah, and if you want to know more about Marilyn Mosby and that story, we did cover it on Chris's podcast, so I highly recommend people go check that out.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. And okay, that's not working. Um, so yeah, so we had sort of gotten into talking about anti-Semitism, and I was really eager to hear some of the points you were interested in making. Uh, and we didn't get as much into the conversation as I had hoped. So, is there anything from that conversation that you feel like you hadn't had a chance to say, or how should we jump into this?
Well, I think you're more knowledgeable about it than me, and it would be great. I'd love to hear more about your perspective. I think what we were talking about that felt like such a relief for me to talk to you about, because I don't know a lot of people that I could talk to about this, was that, despite our commitment to wanting to free Palestine, despite our opposition to the Israeli government, we were aware that there was a lot of anti Semitism in the discourse. And teasing that apart and feeling like we were allowed to talk about that, because I do find, if you bring it up on Twitter or even in conversations among people who support Palestine, it often gets shut down, and it often gets shut down in anti Semitic ways. Like, we don't want to hear about your Jewish tears. Or like, why are you making it about you again, you settler? I think a lot of people don't understand that Israel isn't the Jewish state any more than, certain Islamic countries are not the Islamic state. um, I think the left in this country knows better than to equate or hold every Muslim in this country responsible for ISIS, the Islamic State. And yet, there is this idea out there that Israel actually is the Jewish state and represents us. It calls itself the Jewish state, but ISIS calls itself the Islamic State. It's not true,
Right. Not all Jews are Zionists, and certainly not all Jews are Israeli. And not all Israelis are Zionists. So it's definitely a complicated argument conversation, unfortunately, because it's been complicated to, I feel, muddy the waters. So yeah, I mean, jumping off from that, I guess, I would have to say that it, you know, like Zionism has had a complicated history in other people's formation, like other people's ideologies, right? So the people that we would classify as maybe like neo-Nazis or people who are I would just classify them as fascist, really, because there are so many different categories. There are so many different ideological like branches here, there, and everywhere, and it's very hard to keep track of. And so basically, I would just I would say fascist. So uh, there have always been sort of fascist, anti-Jewish fascist interests in Israel, because there have been people who are interested in shoving all the Jews into a corner so then they can then go to war with Israel and decimate us, right? So that's one thing. So when we're talking about anti-Zionism, when we're talking about a situation that has been brewing not just for 20 years but for 75 years, then we are talking about people who have literally bred their ideologies in a reality in which Zionism in Israel exists. Okay, so um, so we need to look at this in a couple of ways, I think. And please feel free to like just jump in with stuff and interrupt me and ask questions, and because I'm going to be all over the place, I know myself. But so so there are several, again, there are several different branches of fascism, Not all of them are specifically anti-Jewish, but there are essentially what sort of unites most fascist entities is that they believe in some form of ethno-state for themselves, as well as, eradicating others, right? So, again, in that effort, there are some that would want, okay, so let me just bring up this example right now. Let me see if I can pull it up really quick. So I had a friend of mine shared this post with me, and it's just the perfect example of what I'm talking about. Find it, please. Where are my bookmarks? See, this is how prepared I am. I'm so good at this. More bookmark. Okay. All right. So there is somebody, I don't know if you're familiar with. His name is Alexander Dugin.
Yeah,
He is. Are you familiar with him?
it rings a bell.
Okay. So he is a uh, a Russian, I guess you could say, philosopher, ideologist, politician, so in that area, talking head. Okay, and he has created created the Neo Eurasia Party or ideology, in which he believes that Russia should be put back into its biggest form of the empire and become an ethno state. Okay, so he has been known to sort of dabble in uh, other arenas with other fascists who have other agendas, just to sort of like network. Okay, these people network. So I'm going to share a screen of a screenshot about how his opinion flipped, because he used to be very friendly and probably still is on the DL with Zionists, and he flipped on October 7th to support the Palestinians for his own advancement. And there are plenty of examples. You could definitely point to Jackson Hinkle. You could definitely point to plenty of other people that have voiced white supremacist support in the past that have jumped on the pro-Palestine bandwagon. So this is a complicated, hot mess right now. So let me see if I can share my screen. Which one is the share screen one? Is it oh, if I do this. I'm so good at life. No. Screen. Okay. Okay. I need to share this one. Share. Okay. So, can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here, Johnny points out that Dugin once said Palestinians have no chance in such a war with Israel because they cannot destroy Israel or inflict a significant military defeat on it. And then he recently tweeted that the collapse of Israel is inevitable. And he again, it was implied here that he did it, but there's receipts of the
Okay,
original
so
tweet and the
just
tweet.
to be clear, this guy is a Christian white supremacist.
Yes,
Okay. Well,
yes, he is. He
isn't this
is a
just
Christian white supremacist for the Russian church. Okay, so
yeah?
yeah, go ahead.
Well, the Palestinian argument is an opportunity to broaden anti-Semitism, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Uh, and just to show how deep the duplicity is, you can see here that he has direct political ties with Mir Khan, who is believes in a Jewish ethno state, and was kicked out of the Knesset for being too racist against Palestinians. Okay, and please go away now. And also, this guy. who again is a far right-wing Zionist. So these people, uh, you know, so again, so I'm painting a picture essentially of the group of people who we would consider fascists have so many different ideologies, and we should be thankful for that because that divides them and it keeps them all crazy and running around with each other trying to network and build an alliance, and they can't do it because they're all trying to create different ethno-states based on different definitions of different ethnicities, right? So I'm glad for the confusion, but there is an air of confusion that is happening, and I do think that. So yeah, let me stop there for a second. Do you have anything to comment so far?
So are you saying that these Zionists and these pro-Palestinian fascists actually do network and connect with each other?
Yes.
Okay.
So again, the people that I was pointing out. Let me go a little deeper into what I was just saying. Um, come back. Come back. Screenshot. Okay. I'm gonna share my screen. Was it this one? No, that's me. I'm not that pretty. Come on, guys. Screen share. Here we go. Okay. So Mir Khan wrote this book, Never Again. Okay, and I had to look into this, right? And apparently the term never again was actually originally a Zionist term to begin with, which I didn't know. And even though it was shouted after what the freedoms from one of the camps in World War II, it's always been a part of a Zionist saying, apparently. So this book, I don't know specifically. I haven't read it, but it does outline his ideas, and I'm going to quote from uh, Wikipedia on what exactly his brand of thinking is. And this man, again, um, was in the Knesset for one term before he was kicked out, or voted out. And they implemented a rule after he left to ensure that racist parties would never be allowed back in the Knesset because of him. So let's see. Let me find where I was looking at. Okay, so Khan, went so far as to demand that non-Jews in Israel either become slaves or face deportation. He believed in uh, uh, complete apartheid, a complete. Did I miss it? I'm sorry, I'm going backward in my notes here. Yeah, that's the never again. No. Okay, I think I just took a picture of that one thing. So, I mean, basically, there was also a screenshot that I'm definitely missing right now that it said that he wanted to ensure that there was separation between Palestinians and Jews, and to make sure that the Palestinians were kept as slaves and ghettoed. And that's a philosophy that was indeed too right wing for the Knesset back in 1988.
Yeah.
So that is somebody who not only did Alexander Dugin, the original guy that I was speaking about, who is a Russian Christian white supremacist. Okay, that Mir Khan was on Alexander Dugin's party. Okay, he has the again this neo Eurasianist party, which again is even more right wing than Vladimir Putin. In Russia, they're considered the right wing option against Vladimir Putin. Okay, and they literally Mir Khan was on his, board of executives or something for his party.
So can I ask you something? Just to try to pinpoint what you're getting at. Is what you're getting at similar to the fact that Netanyahu expresses positive feelings about Hitler? Like,
yes.
Is it about the fact that fascists are more interested in the idea of control and subjugation and nationalism and race superiority than any particular race superior, and that is because if they can, and that was true back in the mid-century wave of fascism too, right? I mean, there were these fascist countries around Europe, Hitler being one, Mussolini, etc. They didn't all have the same idea of who should be in charge and who should be exterminated. It was more that fascism was popular, and a lot of the Trumpists in our country, they don't like Jews whatsoever, but they're down for a Jewish state in Israel because of the show of force, because of the control and subjugation of others. And also, like, if they can get away with it there, we can get away with it here. They like the strongman leaders. They don't even mind, Arab leaders that are fascist. They don't like Arabs, but they're fine with Arab leaders being fascists in their own realms, right?
Right. I mean, it's really that the mentality is really that if the Jews commit a genocide against Muslims, and I want to come in and commit a genocide against both the Jews and the Muslims, there will be a lot less people to kill once the Jews are done with their genocide. That is really the mentality we're talking about.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that gets to a lot of the heart of the argument against anti-Semitism on the left. I mean, there's a lot of arguments against anti-Semitism on the left. One being that you're weakening your position again in support of Palestine. When you say anti-Semitic things, you're giving mileage to the people who claim that the whole movement is anti-Semitic, which it isn't. But another one, sorry, you were saying, right. Another one is that, in fact, most Zionists are Christians, So that's who, right. That's who actually, I see sometimes these intentioned pro-Palestinian leftists making lists of Jews in some community as if to say, look at the power these folks hold and look at their connection to Israel. See, I told you. But in fact, as some have pointed out, like, the most powerful Zionist in our country is Joe Biden, a Catholic, by far. So, yeah, I mean, and so that sort of ties into what you were saying, I think, which is that, yeah, I think so. Sorry.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And I appreciate you pulling me on my rabbit hole of my Wikipedia entries, because I was juggling them there for a second. But yeah, it's, we're in a world where, the leaders of this world, where people who deal in power and in politics, they all sort of know each other. They all sort of network. They all sort of go to events together, right? And some of these all people who are interested in creating an ethno state sort of talk to each other about it, and they compare notes, and they look at they look at the Nazis, and they look at what Hitler did, and they discuss the pros and cons of what happened. I mean, that's normal for these people. And so I want people to know that in the pro-Palestinian movement, to watch out who you're talking to, and to watch out what kind of information that you're spreading, and who is the person that is saying it. Because a lot of the people, like Jackson Hinkle, for example, is spreading just plain news, plain pro-Palestinian news, giving numbers. And it's very easy for people who care about what's happening over there to just sort of share blindly, right? But he is one of the worst right-wing talking heads in this country right now. And he is definitely not, he's definitely interested in a pro-Zionist movement for Christian reasons, to be honest. I think, and I would happily have a debate about that, do some more research about that, of course. But that this is an opportunity that a lot of people have seized to benefit either their agendas or their pockets, and most of them both.
Yes, I mean, I do recall you talking about this a bit, and I'm sure you're right. There are people who really track these far right groups far better than I do. I have
Far
been.
better than I do. I have a group of friends that are doing better than I do. They have a group of friends that do better than they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I so my attention was sort of on leftism and its problems. um, while identifying with it, because I was sort of supportive of the Bernie Sanders movement, voted twice, campaigned, but because I'm disabled, began to pick up on this really harsh rhetoric against disabled people on the left. And it wasn't the influence of the right on the left, it was just homegrown in collectivism. The idea that if you needed to have food delivered, you were weak, you were lying, you were crazy. If you cared too much about COVID, you were, and there's some problems on the left that are go back to early socialism. Like Marx had two relatives that killed themselves when they became disabled because of the idea of being useful and fit, and that persists in today's leftist ideology in a big offensive way. And you had spoken about how the left's kind of reaction against identity politics is a part of that, that and the class essentialism, like boiling everything down to class and workers, and like the fetishization of like labor and hard labor and working, and then you have this group of people who are disabled and don't work, and being stigmatized. And so with that, I also was noticing anti-Semitism and racism. Back when Bernie was running, there were a lot of Black people pointing out, you guys have a racism problem. And I have to say, I wasn't taking it that seriously. And now that I've experienced, I'm not saying I thought they were wrong. I just thought that their concerns were probably less serious than they were. That was my fault, because now I've experienced the ableism in what is considered the US left. And a lot of it is very young people, young, white, able-bodied, mostly men, not only. And so then as support for Palestine came in, it's been very easy for me to see some people are just excited about the opportunity to hate Jews in their support of Palestine, and lots of people aren't. Lots of people are trying to tamp that down. A lot of the protests are very explicitly saying, we don't welcome anti-Semitism here, it hurts our cause. Like, I know that there's good efforts there. I'm not out protesting, I can't physically, but I know, and I'm reading about it. But at the same time, there's just this like, there are pockets, and people get excited about the chance to be bigots, period, when they think they can get away with it across the entire political spectrum, and I think ableism is by far the worst that I see, most blatant, and anti-Semitism and racism are there too, and so that's kind of where my focus is. And that's not to say that right wingers aren't exploiting that or contributing to that and inflaming it, but I think it's already inherent in the left has its own problems already without even worrying about right wingers coming in.
Absolutely.
And it's gotten kind of like worse in some ways. It's I think since COVID, like and since kind of the end of the Bernie Sanders movement, it's become this like fractious, angry, very narrow-minded sort like, and it's not successful. There aren't like successful leftist movements happening right now like there was. Bernie came so close to being president, for a socialist. We don't have anyone like that now. And I think because bigotry is just such an exciting option for people, and I really think that this is kind of what happens during pandemics and during economic depressions. Like people turn to this kind of thing, and it's really tricky because the rhetoric on the left is so. I mean, people just sound like memes. They don't sound like people. They're just sort of repeating things, and they have arguments against, if you bring up, hey, you shouldn't be anti-Semitic, you shouldn't be racist, you shouldn't be ableist, they call you a fed, like. So this is the bulk of the discourse that I see, and it hasn't turned me against believing in, wanting economic and social justice. It hasn't turned me against that, but it has made me no longer quite identify as left because of that. And I know that's true for a lot of people, like a lot of people I know.
Yeah. To be honest, the left has fractured. I have experienced a bumpy ride on that front myself, and it has fractured to the point where we're seeing a lot of people who did support Bernie weren't actually left to begin with. I think, and I'm happy to call them out as the Jimmy Dore left, and I'm happy to say that these people are showing their whole ass right now, because they are supporting Alex Jones. They are spewing the same conspiracy theories. They are spewing the same right-wing talking points that come from white supremacist groups. And they are, they have fallen prey to sort of like the dude bro thing, right? Like it's what we have to acknowledge, and what has been missing, I think, for a while, is the presence of feminism in the conversation of the left. Because
Definitely.
the patriarchy is an overarching theme, and it really brings so many different kinds of people together to the point where it's almost scary, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's a part of the puzzle. I'm not saying that white supremacy isn't as much of an issue, because it is. It's a huge issue. In fact, and again, I keep saying that I'm going to put this interview up, but I had an amazing interview with Irami Ose Frimpong, who was telling me about how he believed that the patriarchy can be easily defined by the plantation system, and that it's the patriarchy who those who are in charge of the patriarchy, who are people who would have been in charge of a plantation system, right? White men. And then it sort of falls from there. White women are still not in the head of the house, but they're still a part of the house, and then further down and further down, right? So I can definitely see that in this country, the patriarchy certainly functions that way. And I definitely think that we need to start bringing that back into the conversation, because again, we are talking about, we are talking about the oppression of people and cultures who are not white male Christian, right?
Right.
That's essentially who the right supports and who the left is trying to win equality against, essentially.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
These movements that like sprouted up in the last 10 years or so on the left, I find a lot of them are led by men or white men, able-bodied, straight, and unwilling to cede their seat or their voice to someone else. A lot of politics, period, is just power grabs, And what happened is these are white men, millennial, Gen Z, who didn't get what they thought they were owed as being white men. They didn't get the wealth that they thought that they should have just gotten for working. and wealth and power. And so they've created these organizations on the left, meant to disrupt. So, but just so that they can have their little piece of that. And so these aren't revolutions that inspire me to join them, at all. And there's definitely a lot of times these organizations, it's very tricky because I've encountered a lot of organizations that talk a good game about race in particular. But a lot of times the discourse has been crafted by white men, like, with a nod towards, hey, we're going to be equal. And they will go after you if they think that you said something that, whatever. But they're not allowing people of color to actually, and then a lot of organizations that are Black-led organizations are still led by men or by wealthy people, by straight people. So it's like, we don't have, like disabled people always say nothing about us without us, because it's sort of like, well, we do have this one disabled there's tokenizing and stuff. There's all these rhetorical strategies to make these organizations look more fair and equitable than they are. And it's like designed so that you can't criticize it. But ultimately they're not, it's like these bros that are not ceding their positions,
Yeah.
And it makes me feel unsafe, I don't feel safe at any part of the spectrum,
Right.
So that these are big problems. And then so anti-Semitism is just easy for these groups. And frankly, it's like, it's so ingrained that I encounter a lot of Jews, who, if I say, can you stop talking about Israel as being about Jews? Can you stop bringing me into it? And I run into Jews who are like, you are into it. We are into it. We have to take responsibility for this. And so it's like, it's even influenced Jews, and these are Jews that would never say that about Muslims. They would never say that Muslims need to take responsibility in our country to be responsible for Saudi Arabia, or for any fascist Muslim state. They would never say that. But as Jews, they feel like we have to do that because they've sort of co-opted the anti-Semitism that's everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
It's more than that, though, because Zionism has been a huge influence in Jewish culture, to the point where it's so blended in with a lot of the synagogues that I've been to, and a lot of the people that I've spoken to. It's such a part of our culture. I mean, don't we say at Passover next year in Israel? Isn't that a toast that we make to each other?
I mean, I understand. I didn't grow up with any of that. So I grew up in such a secular household. And the only synagogue I ever went to as an adult was like very, very reformed. So I never did it. But I was always Jewish. So I never did encounter any of that. So I believe you.
So, well, you're good. I'm glad that you didn't.
And maybe that's why Jews feel that some Jews feel that I should, either be pro-Israel or take responsibility for Israel. But it's never been part. But it's never been any part of my life whatsoever. Like we never talked about Israel. If anything, my parents would have just been like, "Oh, he's a fucking asshole," about not Netanyahu or about Israel. But we never talked about it ever. Our identity as Jews were filmmakers, writers, food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we were talking about that too a little bit on Chris's show, and that's something we can talk about a little more as well if you'd like. But I mean, generally speaking, I would agree that my upbringing was similar because I went to synagogue because if I didn't, my grandmother wouldn't give money to my college fund. That was why I went. And my mother was very into like the new agey kind of stuff, very much into spirituality and meditation. And she had no time for, the synagogue. She had no time for it. She just sent me to Hebrew school. But I still grew up in, with those people around me, with a lot of people who you know, and again, I grew up in East Brunswick, New Jersey. Well, I grew up in Middlesex, but I did a lot of things in East Brunswick, New Jersey, and in that area there are a lot of Jews. There are a lot of Jews in that area, and it's part of the culture to talk about, you know, going on your birthright trip. Are you going on your birthright trip when you go on a birthright? You know, and that brings you back a different person. Like they really brainwash you over there to the point
Yeah.
where on it wasn't on October 7th, but it was like like in the weeks following. My one of my god sisters found that my Instagram for Millennial Splaining and saw that I was posting pro-Palestinian stuff. And she told her other god sister, my other god sister, her real sister, because she knew it would piss her off. And she came back at me and started yelling, "Am Yisraeli chai," or "Hi, am Yisraeli chai," you know, like, and it's like, whoa, like she went to Birthright for a week and she comes back speaking Hebrew. Like, dude, like it's very ingrained here. And I never, not for a second in my life, was taught that there was anything wrong with Israel. I had no idea that we were doing anything to Palestinian people until I became an adult and started to realize the political realities of what was happening. I was not brought up with that whatsoever. And we were
Yeah.
hippies.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Like something to consider is that there are also a lot of Jews like me who, for cultural and economic reasons or race, you know, non-white Jews and stuff, don't grow up with any Israel ideology at all.
Mm,
And I don't think we're the majority. But one of the things I deal with is on both sides, I feel like our people are wondering if I'm really Jewish in some sense, because on the one side, well, if you're not supporting Israel, whatever, you're not really a Jew. On the other side, well, if you didn't grow up around this, do you really count as one of the real Jews in this country? And I didn't, you know, I do count. Like, you know
of
what I
course you
mean?
do.
But I think it's all, so it's also like there are, I think I think some of it is class too. You know, I think wealthier Jews grow up, and I don't know your class either, and I'm not saying all, but you know, and it's generational. But it just, I wasn't even around Jews a lot, but I always knew myself to be Jewish. But that's one of the reasons why, for me, nobody can affiliate me with Israel, point anything and in any way, or create any sense of responsibility around it. It's been less a part of my life than a lot of Christians,
Mhm.
like like zero part of my life. You know what I mean?
Sure, sure.
So
And you know, that's I mean, I think that's great to hear because your parents did the right thing in raising you, on some level, that they raised you, you know, to be, you know, into equality. So that's beautiful, and that's the right message to take from the Holocaust, I think. Some people, again, have taken it the other way. So, and by the way, when I was talking about Mir Khan, he was one of the first people to say, you know, in that book, Never Again, that the Holocaust is the specific reason why we need to create a Jewish ethno state to protect ourselves from that ever happening again. Right.
right,
So
right,
there's so many different angles for this. It's like there's too much. It's almost too much.
yeah,
But I respect what you're saying, um, because I personally don't believe in God, and I never really have. I definitely believe in that we're all connected spiritually. I definitely believe that matter and energy are interchangeable, and I definitely believe that there is an element of consciousness to energy that we don't understand. But I also know that there are times when I can walk into a room full of wasps, right? And I will be othered because I am big, I am loud, and I have got, you know, that sort of Jewish sarcasm, right?
hmm,
Like there's something about the American Jewish experience that is
yeah,
specific. And we have been othered for those reasons, absolutely, from like the top tiers of society, from the wasps. I absolutely felt that. I absolutely felt that in private school, certainly. where I was in middle school. I was like one of maybe 2 or 3 Jewish kids,
Yeah.
and I was the only fat one, so it was definitely, they were more accepting of men rather than of women being Jewish, because again, we have a different style of talking, we have a different style of complaining, we have our, sometimes talking is complaining.
I
I
like to
walk
say
up to you and I tell you my medical problems, like
I like
these
to
are
say that
thank you.
that complaining is Jewish prayer. It's our
Exactly.
prayer.
I love that.
But
That's super accurate.
listen, I had the exact same experience as you. You know,
Yeah.
I grew up not around Jews. I was othered. I look at my elementary school. You know, I later went to schools that where white people were minorities. You know, where there were more Black and Hispanic and immigrant people, like magnet programs and stuff, because I felt so other among, the white schools. There were very few Jews. Like my skin was darker, and I don't have dark skin,
Mhm.
but and I was made fun of as a Jew, like constantly. Here's some pennies. Do you have horns? You know, girls would write burn books, and my thing would be that I have a Jewish nose. You know what I mean? So I
Mhm.
experienced, and then of course, like the loudness, the complaining, the speaking my mind. Like I did not live in a household where I wasn't supposed to do that.
Mhm.
My model was like the most vocal person in our household was my mother. So
Yeah.
I had the same experience as you. And I think because of that, like in my 30s, I wanted to find Jewish identity. I felt like it was too many years without, like, my parents grew up with synagogues and they rebelled, but I never got anything to rebel, or to define. So I went to like extreme reform synagogues, like very far left with like, lesbian rabbis, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And what I found was that the religion of Judaism already shaped my consciousness, even though I had never been exposed to it. That like a Jewish conception of God was much closer to how I saw the world and the universe than this, crap my Christian friends were talking about, where you had to be like good. And if you were good, you were rewarded, all that stuff.
Right.
So I think it's hard for a lot of us Jews in this country. There's so many secular Jews to figure out our identity, to understand what is ethnicity, what is religion, to understand that you can have a religion without belief, which is not a Christian thing. I remember I went to the rabbi at the synagogue where I was like, listen, I think I'm an atheist, but I would like to keep coming here. And she said, we have a lot of atheists. And it was okay. You know what I mean? Because I was still Jew. And that's when I started to understand, okay, the Jewish conception of religion is not even that. Like, I've been raised around a Christian conception of religion where belief mattered. And I can be Jewish without believing anything, and I'm still Jewish. And I liked that. And so already, all these years, even now, still formulating identity, still trying to understand what it means to be Jewish while people are defining you and making fun of you as Jewish before you've even got a handle on what it means for you. And
Mhm.
then we have to throw Israel into this. And
Right.
so it's a lot. You know what I mean? It's like a
Mhm.
lot, because then you throw Israel into this, and I'm like, well, that's not a place I'm related to. That's not a place I have any affiliation to. But I'm hearing you say things that are really anti Semitic about it. You know what I mean? So, anti Semitic,
Well,
like, I heard a whole bunch of people discussing how we got to wipe all the Jews out of Israel. And that's not even the Hamas point of view. Like, even Hamas doesn't want to do that. But it was like
I
the
don't want to do that
glue.
either. For clarity, please. I'm talking about other people's ideals when I was talking about that shit. I
No, totally.
personally not
Totally.
like that.
I didn't mean you,
Oh,
but
okay.
I meant that's how standard some of the anti-Semitic discourse around Israel is.
Sure.
Even though, like, it's not anti-Semitic to support Palestinian freedom. It's not anti-Semitic to think Israel shouldn't have been founded and is an issue and all that. But it is anti-Semitic to say wipe all the Jews away. And it's
Right.
like, and I'm still figuring out what it means to be Jewish. I'm still dealing with shame from being a child when I used to lie about being Jewish because people didn't like it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I use the fact that my last name didn't sound Jewish to be other things, you know? Sorry
Mhm.
to go on. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. No, I think what you're saying is really important because for perspective, right? I mean, the reason that and this was going into what I was talking about on Chris's show when we were talking about uh, Israel being a sort of like Jew, like a white Jewish way to sort of enter white society in a way, because
Hmm.
here's the disconnect, right? Because yes, we are othered from waspy white society. Yes, we are kept in sort of our place. And we have managed to build places of power, which again, and if you look back through history, like you can see that, that's been kind of the Jews pattern throughout Europe, right? Is that we build up little areas of power and that's how we sort of manage in a society that hates us for a while, you
Yeah,
know?
right.
And that was what happened when a lot of Jews emigrated here from the Russian pogroms and then again from World War II, right? So we're building we're building the community here of European Jews who have a mind to start over. And a lot of people, again, a lot of people started doing stuff with Israel. A lot of people started bringing Zionism over here, and a lot of people again, we are a reflection of that culture, and that culture found its power in media, found its power in some areas like the jewelry industry, some areas
Yeah,
like that, right? But the media is most important to this conversation because that is the reason that we have a otherness about us that indicates to people that we are Jewish, right? That is the reason that and again, when these people when Jews were taking over, not taking over the media, but we're building their power base in the media. We're starting to put out these things. They were doing it to familiarize people with Jews, to erase these pictures of Jews as like these evil Shylocks with big noses and whatnot, right? They were doing it to sort of make them friendly. So what do? We're very self-deprecating. We make a lot of jokes, and we complain a lot under our breath with sarcasm, right? We deal with pain through sarcasm and humor. And these are very important because we don't want, these are what make us non-threatening to a waspy community, right?
right.
Um,
Definitely. And also being supported in supportive roles. The funny sidekick,
right,
the lawyer, the banker, the person who helps you with your wealth, you know?
right. Exactly. And to this day, like, well, Seth Rogen and what's his friend? James, Jim, the pretty boy. I forget his name now. Anyway,
Yeah.
I remember the Jewish one, but the other one, there's a pretty boy Christian, and then there's Seth Rogen. He's a fat Jew, right? It's
Yeah.
the same thing,
Yeah.
and it is again, but it
And
is
also
something that is
not being physically threatening. Yeah.
exactly,
Right.
absolutely, and these are things again that are specific to white Jews, and they although we are othered in waspy society, we are considered useful, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so there
Right.
is, like, we do have to realize at some level, like if somebody said to me, like, I don't want to hear your Jewish tears, I would be like, I understand. However, you know what I'm saying? Because this is we're trying to get into a society that's filled with oppressors,
Right.
right? And to do so, we are becoming oppressors ourselves.
Certainly. Like, one of the most offensive arguments I hear from some white Jews is when they say, I'm not white or I don't have white privilege. Like, of
Right.
course, I have white privilege in this country. Like, of
Absolutely.
course. I also face some anti Semitism, but like, jeepers, I have the ability to pass and I have proximity to whiteness and I have these defined roles that white people enjoy having around them to make laugh and help them and stuff. So,
Right.
it's exactly what Donald Trump would say is like, he would say, I love my Jews, you know? So it's like, okay, so when Trump becomes president, an evil dictator or whatever, he's going to want his Jews around him. It's not going to be the best role in society. It's not going to be unoffensive, but it's a survival tactic.
It is a survival tactic, and it's an unfortunate one, because at the end of the day, Donald Trump would toss us right under the bus as soon as it's convenient,
Yes,
right?
exactly,
So,
exactly.
right,
Yes,
yeah,
and could very easily start gassing us, you know. But for now, you know, like
yeah. Well, for now, they're just white phosphorusing, over Gaza. So
right.
that's it's always somebody. If it's not going to be us, it's going to be somebody else. Unfortunately, that's how unfortunately our world is structured.
One
Um,
can I jump to something else? Do you mind?
of course, yeah.
Okay. One of the interesting things about the Gaza conversation, like I get my foot in my mouth sometimes because I'm always like laying out facts. And, I'm not the only one. There's a Jewish scholar, Mia something. She's pro-Palestinian, but she's a scholar of Mia Brad, I think her name is. She just gets hell all day on Twitter because she has nuance. Like, for instance, Zionism wasn't always about nationalism. They were spiritual Zionists originally who believed that Israel was a spiritual homeland but shouldn't be formed as a country that subjugated other people. So that was a form of Zionism. But in any case, sorry, what was I talking about? Now I've gone blank.
Oh no, you
I
said
have
somebody.
COVID brain. Yeah. Oh, laying out fat. Yes. I'm so happy that I remembered my thought. It's a victory. So, like the white supremacy of it all when it comes to Israel is interesting to me. But people really want to cling to translating our model of white supremacy onto Israel. And it is true that white Jews in Israel have the most power in that country. But they're not even there's so many Arab Jews, and people don't know that history. They don't, when they talk about like white European Jews in control, and they don't know that half of Israel has an Arab origin, and that those Arab Jews are lesser on the social scale than the white Jews, but they also hate Palestinians, and that there are white Palestinians. And so I feel like that conversation is always really interesting to me. And it would be great if people could not just apply our frameworks. Now, we could talk about white supremacy in Palestine if we want. And we could talk about Palestinians being people of color and Israelis not being people of color. It's not, that's fine. But then you're just talking about power. You're not talking about skin tone anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like the Arab Jews in Israel are more supportive of Netanyahu than the white Jews, like in polling and in voting and stuff.
Wow.
Because he's a populist dictator. It's like how Trump wins over the Latinos. Like they're Jewish, and so he's sort of giving them Jewish supremacy, and they like that. And they are also
them the illusion that they would then be equal with the white Jews in that country, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that there's also like economic imbalance that he kind of, how, something Bernie would always talk about is like when there's economic fear, people turn to racism and hatred and stuff. So I think it's some of that. I'm not sure all of it, but I do know that they come out strongly in favor of Netanyahu and against Palestinians. Wow. And that's a little disruptive of the race narrative, even though it doesn't make anything about Israel better,
right?
To talk about that. I just think that's really interesting,
Yeah. Well, I guess if you wanted to parallel that with what's going on here, somebody like like Candace Owens, or somebody on the far right that is demographically speaking a Black American African American person, or a Hispanic person, or a Latino person. I don't. I still see it like like it's absolutely not as clear cut. You're absolutely right. It's not as clear cut, and it's easy for the media to try to make it that way because so many people don't understand what's going on and think it's complicated, and they're, the media is trying to sort of communicate it as simply, to get eyeballs. So yeah, were you going to say something?
No, no,
Oh, okay.
no.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I absolutely believe what you're saying is valid, and it's definitely a conversation that people should be having more, and it's definitely a conversation that is valuable to bring up in pro-Palestinian conversations. That there are Jews supporting pro-Palestine, there are Jews in this country asking, I mean, there the Jewish Voices for Peace. I believe one of the people was talking to Christina Mir Khalil, who's the candidate that I'm working with in the Green Party. And she was saying, like, please, anytime you can, like, please just, give the Jews that are protesting for a pro-Palestine a shout out, because we're, sort of dancing a line between two parties that are very, very emotionally charged right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we're putting our bodies on the front line for you guys, and we want to, and I feel like I feel like I want to, because of how I grew up. But yeah.
There was an interesting set of tweets I saw. It was a black woman was retweeting it who I really respect, and they were highlighting where a pro-Palestinian position had name checked a Jewish man who was in support of them. Okay,
Mm.
and there is, I can't think of the person now. I should have brought some evidence with you, but there are certain high profile Jews who support Palestine. Finkelstein is one, right?
Mhm.
And people cite them a lot, and
Right.
I think part of that is citing them is to say, like, is to show that Jews also support Palestinians, to break the idea that it's anti-Semitic to support Palestinians, right?
Right.
But what this woman was talking about was, can we stop doing that? Can we stop centering Jews who support Palestine? And I thought that was really interesting. Like,
Yeah.
it took me back for a second, because I understood the rhetorical value in centering Jews who support Palestine. I understand why that's powerful, and it puts a middle finger up to people who say it's anti-Semitic, right? No,
Right.
we have Jews on our side, but I understood what she meant, because she was saying, let's not, like, can we center Palestinians? Can we center, do we have to center the Jews who, it's almost like centering Schindler in the Holocaust.
Right. Right. Right.
You know what I mean? And that movie,
Absolutely.
it's like Spielberg. You had to make the movie about the wasp. You know what I mean? The goyim. Like, can't you just have Jews be heroes? Like, but similarly, I think that was her perspective. Her perspective was like, you're kind of, it is a problem of like harming a cause by centering the saviors as opposed to
Hmm.
the most affected. It's
Yeah.
just like another nuance to this.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it's we're in a time of serious flux when we're talking about the Jewish community, globally and here, right? We're in a time of serious flux, and it's very divisive. A lot of people are charged, emotionally charged, and a lot of people are ready to start yelling, even if they're not sure why. You know?
Yeah.
Um,
Have you lost friendships
yeah.
over
Oh, yeah.
anti-Semitism, or just over not supporting, of over support? Like, I'm curious, like, I'm sure you've lost friendships with, because you have a lot of connections in the Jewish community and stuff. I'm sure there are people who you support Palestine and they can't get with that or whatever. But have you
Right.
also lost any friendships because people were anti-Semitic?
I have been socially othered because of it, like to the point where they wouldn't be friends with me in the first place. You know what I mean? Like,
Ah, right.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I've never, I mean, it's always hard to tell, right? Because we are white. right? So it's hard to say that, like, oh, I'm in a position where, I'm the only, Jewish person in the room or whatever, because, like, I don't know how the other person is seeing me that day, right? And I don't know who the, what biases that other person has, right? It's highly dependent.
Yeah.
But I, absolutely, to the point where people have, I think people have stopped dating me. I think people have not hired me, because of some of the ways that I come off that I would attribute to being raised in a Jewish culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. It's so
Yeah.
funny because I can't even tell anymore because I'm also autistic. I can't even tell what's what anymore. And you know what I mean? And I'm also like disabled and kind of been isolated for a few years. So I can't even tell, like, wait, is that because I'm Jewish? Or am I just like an offensive person? Or am I autistic? Or, is it because I'm neurodivergent or Jewish? That could be like, that could be a whole game.
It could be, yeah. I do the same thing with me and, like, my fatness. Like, okay, did you not like me because my fatness, because I'm a woman, because I'm a lesbian, because I'm Jewish? Which one? Which one?
100% queerness in there too. Yeah, for me.
Yes.
And also, like, definitely the Jewish body being an interesting one. Like, I when I was growing up, it was like these I the eating disorders and stuff around me with these like white kids. And then, like I told you, I transferred to a magnet school where I was a minority, and it was, you know, Black, Latina, and a lot of immigrants from South America and from Africa, the Eritreans. It was everybody, and my body issues went away.
Yeah.
And the Jewish bodies look different, you know what I mean? And we also eat more and stuff. So it's like that's also part of it. And finding myself later also in Black culture, not because I sought that instead of Jewish culture. It was just there and it was the jobs I was taking. But feeling more myself than in white American culture, because there are people making a lot of jokes, emotional, loud, angry, like all the things that we were permitted to do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Talking back
Yeah.
to the TV, making jokes during movies. Absolutely. I 3,000,000% agree. And in fact, I'm in my mother-in-law's house right now, and my fiance is Black. They're all Black. And I feel very comfortable here. They're very, very, very good people. But it's kind of a double-edged sword, though, because there are situations in which, and I'm not saying that this necessarily applies to your situation, but there are situations in which uh, Jews feel more comfortable in a setting of Black and brown people, because those Black and brown people perceive that Jewish person to be white, and they treat them with a level of respect they would not otherwise.
Yeah.
Because there are situations that happen. I have heard of a case. It's somebody I know. I won't dox them, but their father owned a a factory in the Pennsylvania in the 60s. Okay, and they told me that they felt really comfortable hanging out with the children of the workers, and more comfortable so than their own peers in school and whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's because their dad could fire their dads. Like you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like the disconnect. It it's stuff that we don't see, and I realize that there are situations that I've been in where people have treated me with respect, and I'm left to wonder, like, oh, is it because that my personality is more acceptable in Black society, or is it because they're afraid to actually be themselves around me? I think there's a double-edged sword there.
You're right. You're right. I would say that I've been both more seen in Black communities and invisible, because I've also experienced that.
Yeah.
Like when I went to that high school and I was a minority, like nobody talked to me. It was very lonely, but
Right.
I felt liberated. So I've experienced both sides of that, and you're right about that. Certainly, the cultural affinities are stronger than with white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, but
Hmm.
at the same time, you're right. It could, there's so much going on when you're the only white person in the room. There's so many things happening at once, for better and worse,
Yeah, it
and
is.
Yes, definitely. But I
You know,
have
yeah, go ahead.
well, I just have never felt at home in a group of Jews, unfortunately. I tried a lot of times. Like my friend would take me to the kosher dining hall and stuff. And maybe there's something I have to explore there that has to do with Israel or my upbringing. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it is. It's kind of sad to me.
Well, speaking as a daughter of hippies,
Yes.
I can tell you why I felt uncomfortable around my Jewish peers. Um, and it's because I embraced the parts of myself that we were just talking about, that I'm loud and I'm big and I eat and whatever. And not we're not supposed to do that.
What?
We're supposed to be hiding it. We're supposed to be embarrassed by it. We're supposed to be definitely the iron fist behind the family, but we use our husbands as puppets. You know what I'm saying? Like we have to keep the veneer because we're in a waspy society, and I think that that is an important
Oh.
part of the equation. And because I never felt bad. I mean, I when I was around like Jewish kids, like Jewish girls, for example, when we're middle school age and we're all like eating matzah for Passover and whatever, like they would eat a shit ton of matzah and then they would be like, oh my God, I'm so fat. I had ate way too much matzah. You know what I'm saying? But like that's two cultures fighting each other right there. Because your Jewish culture is telling you should eat the matzah if you're hungry, and then your white culture is telling you should be skinny, you fat bee.
So
So
that's
yeah.
crazy. That's really interesting to me. So we were middle class, and my parents were working class. So
Mhm,
we were never like upper class Jews.
mhm,
So, and I'm not saying you were, but nobody in my family were censoring themselves or worried about. We were all loud and eating too much.
mhm.
So that
That's
is
me.
interesting. It might be that when I've been brought into Jewish society, I've suddenly felt class difference without registering that that's what's going on. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. I definitely think there's an element. My parents, my dad was actually Catholic. He
Oh,
was brought up
wow.
Catholic, and my mother was Jewish. And it was my mother's side of the family that had the money. So my mother's mother was the one who had the money. So it's like we had several generations of like the women having the actual power but still needing a man to deal with the outside world kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Man, I'm like ready to kind of go back into figuring out what it means for me to be a Jew and like really get to the bottom of a lot of this stuff because I don't want
Mhm.
to keep living feeling like I don't know my place among Jews, except that, these issues today activate me, align me very closely with being Jewish. I use my Twitter name, Justine. I don't know, a couple of people were offended, but it's supposed to be a joke because my name is Justine. But
I
I
think it's
want,
hilarious.
like, my name doesn't sound Jewish at all, Justine Barron. So I just wanted to make it crystal clear. I turned my name into as Jewish as I could possibly make it sound,
Aw.
Justine Justine. But I feel like in some ways I have this identification without quite understanding it. You know what I mean? Because it's been,
Mhm.
and if this is part of the Jewish experience, is this assimilation, for centuries. I don't think that anything about my Jewish experience is that unique. It's like there's always been assimilation, passing, you know not practicing, all of that, right?
Right. Hmm.
I feel like we should have been talking about Palestine more. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just like horrible and it needs to stop. Like, I, no, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think this is a valuable conversation, and I'm sorry to sort of take the opportunity to have it with you because I do actually talk about Palestine a lot, and I have spoken with people in Gaza, and I am working on a fundraiser for 10 families in Gaza for them to escape. That's going to be coming out soon. I'm working with Pepper Oceana Lewis. She's amazing, and it's going to be called Project Exodus. So just a
Okay.
little plug for myself there. Um, but yes, but I do think this conversation is valuable because there is a lot of there. It's easy for neo-Nazis, fascists, Christo-fascists, white supremacists to come into this conversation and use the words use the words anti-Semitism, and to use a lot, there's so much confusion, right? That you find yourselves not knowing who to trust.
Yeah.
And when somebody starts saying, Israel is so fucking wrong for this, and just, it depends on which way. I'm always listening. Which way is that rant gonna go? You know what I'm saying? And it is a precarious situation, to be honest, because a lot of the pro-Palestinian people, again, are doing this for opportunistic reasons. A lot of them are interested in ethno-fascist states.
Or just being hateful, like just having that opportunity, like
We're
latching
not
on.
knowing better and
Yeah.
reiterating talking points is a lot of what I'm seeing, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a right around October 7th, there was a post from a channel that I had previously followed, thinking that they were left because I follow some of the Assange stuff. And the Assange is actually a very unique, interesting meeting point, right, for the right and the
Sure.
left.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I followed, I'll dox them. I followed a page called Slow News Day, and they posted a video with somebody doing the Adam Sandler Hanukkah song, but changing the words to saying that the Jews own everything. The Jews own the media. The Jews own everything. Right. And then, and at first, it was subtle enough that I was like, "Oh, this is funny," and the guy's impression was really accurate, actually. So I was like, "Ah!" And then right at the end of it, it's like, if you even have one drop of blood, like all of these Nazi talking points, we should create a Jewish ethno state, and then bombs dropped on the screen. It was literally like this was a Nazi video that was shared. Okay. I tweeted back about this and I was like, did you know that there's literal Nazi propaganda at the end of your video? And the guy was like, oh no, it's just a joke. And a lot of that has been going around. A lot of that has been going around.
It's so sad, first of all, because that song was so seminal for a lot of us in terms of
Yeah,
having some Jewish pride and a wink about
right.
it. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, all these people that are like leading men are half Jewish. Like, not, that makes one fine Jew, and you combine them. Like,
Right.
that song was a big deal. Like, we did
Right.
not, before that, like, I'm old enough to remember, like, we did not talk about being Jewish before that, except like Woody Allen. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's sad that they would do that with it, and that they would turn something that was so self-deprecating and like, hey, there's a few of us, into like, we control everything. It's the opposite. I wish, the problem is like, there's so much that I wish about the left, and I just, I've lost a lot of faith in a lot of it, especially the ableism. It's kind of just thrown me way off. But
Mm-hmm.
the anti-Semitism is like hurting the Palestinian cause, and it's also like so bound up in Islamophobia. They're the same. They go together. You know what I mean? They just, what these people, a lot of the people that you're talking about, benefit from them being pitted against each other. They love that. They love when blacks and Jews fight, like, and and it's like, we are such a convenient scapegoat for these other marginalized groups. If they only understood that it's like, it's very much first they come for the Jews and then but also like, they hate all of us together. And if they act like they like you for a minute to hate us, they don't. you know
Correct.
and that's what you're saying about those people that are like, put those far right people that are supporting Palestine now, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's definitely complicated, and everybody has their own agenda. So you have to be careful about who you're retweeting and paying attention to in this
definitely.
conversation. And we
Well,
can.
yeah.
I was just gonna change. If you want to change the subject and talk about disability rights for a minute, where I would definitely love to do that with you also. But you finish your thought.
No, it's okay. There's not much to say about it. Just most people don't have any disability justice framework at all in their politics. Left, center, right, liberal, conservative. There's none. Honestly, the Catholics are better in some ways because they're anti-eugenicists. But theoretically, yeah, I would like to do what I can to support your Palestinian project and your fundraiser and so keep me please informed about that. All I have, I think being you know being chronically ill, being having to protect myself from COVID still and other infections, especially because I have long COVID. Like I can't go to protests. I also don't like them. I mean, no offense to protesters, it's just a lot. It's just a lot for me. It doesn't work for me. It's like, but I mean, if I had to, I would. But it's
Right.
not. It's not. It, I don't thrive in that setting, and I can't get sick right now, and I can't function that many hours standing up. But so I feel like I really haven't done anything, and I don't feel good about that. So I appreciate if you could let me plug into that.
Oh my
Uh,
God, please. I'd love to. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
could share, do what I can. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I mean, I do a lot of a lot of my work is media criticism, and the media has been like so shockingly pro-Israel. It's almost like my dad is he's not pro-Israel at all, right? And he doesn't like Netanyahu, and he said they've become the Nazis. But at the
Mhm.
same time, he's getting messages because his news sources are the New York Times and NPR that these protests are anti-Semitic by and large, and it's like I don't even know what to say to him. Like I try to share other news sources, but it's really frustrating. You know,
Yeah.
I don't even know what to do about that. Like,
Yeah, I mean that's a scary thing too because there was just something passed in the House, I think, that still has to go through the Senate that anything, that is classified as anti-Semitic will then be, criminally punished. And they will definitely apply that to any pro-Palestinian movement, whether, what kind of attitude it has about Jews or what. I mean, that's definitely what they're going to do. And it's really scary, seeing, you know, because in a lot of ways we're the scapegoats. We're sort of monkey in the middle between people who are in power of the situation, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not like a council of all the Jews that have decided to come together and genocide the Palestinians. It's a a portion of the Jews, right? Like it's not again, and it's not all you know I yeah.
yeah, I mean, that law is so terrifying, and I mean, it's going to harm people of color more than anybody, like all of these laws, like the laws trying to ban masks right now. I walk around with a giant N95 outside. I don't think I would get arrested, maybe, unless I have a seizure or something. But people of color that are immune compromised will. Similarly, these laws, they're going to start using them to lock up more Black people, calling them anti-Semitic.
Yep.
But it's also not so while Jews aren't like while we shouldn't worry more than others, these laws make me feel unsafe as a Jew because it's just going to direct more and more hatred towards us. Like
Yep.
all of this is Israel's actions Zionism has always made the world unsafe for Jews by
Mhm.
forcing other countries that expel Jews because they're so mad at Israel's actions. So yeah, none of this is good for us, but but we also kind of aren't really safe if we try to call out the anti-Semitic. Like it's very. I'm not saying we have it the worst now at all. We
Yeah.
don't. I'm not
No.
saying my Jewish tears are the worst. I'm just saying it's gotten a little tough. because of all of this. And it would be better, as with disability justice, it would be better if all of these movements had some grounding in anti-Semitism awareness, so they didn't promote it. It's not, we're not asking you to stop thinking about Palestine. We're just saying give 5 minutes to understanding this and that,
Yes, be careful of the rhetoric that you're passing. Absolutely. Be careful about who you're aligning with, because yes, you are absolutely 100% right. And it's a tough line that we're dancing, because for all the reasons that we've talked about, it's a tough line. For sure. And I definitely think that it was worth having a conversation about. And that doesn't mean, you're right, that doesn't mean that we are trying to complain and saying that our lot is like poor us or whatever, because no, we're not the main character. We get it. Okay. We're not the ever fucking main character in the media. We're not ever fucking the main character right now. Okay. That's fine.
Right.
That's not the point. The point is that we want to create a real alliance that believes in actual equality, and not an alliance in which there are people that are there to create different ethno states. Right? I mean, because that's really what it is. Either or.
Well, I just really appreciate, and also letting me because some of my thoughts on this subject are really personal and have formed. And so it might be like, what kind of a guest is this? Because I could talk more seriously. About like policing in Baltimore and give you all of this like historical context and social, issues. But in this, I'm just like, this is kind of hard. Like, it's just me.
But no, I think it's completely valuable and valid to say these things, because again, we are attempting to keep the pro-Palestinian movement actually, equitable for everyone.
Right.
And we are also speaking out against the fact that there will eventually be Jews arrested for being anti-Semitic. Right? So this conversation is unfortunately important. Unfortunately.
That's just the wildest one. Honestly, a lot of times the people getting called anti-Semitic the most are Jewish. Bernie Sanders had whole things about how when he ran for president, about how anti-Semitic. The first Jew to run for president was being called anti-Semitic because of his Palestinian position. That was Joy Reid, I believe. I think Joy Reid came after him, and there were whole discussions, whole talk shows about, is Bernie Sanders anti-Semitic? Wow. Like, with nobody batting an eye.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right, actually. These laws will get used against Jews probably more than white Christians.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of Jews are, as you mentioned, angry and feel responsible and are speaking out for Palestinians. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think I gotta go. My throat's getting sore, but I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You're invited back anytime. Thank you so much for coming. This was a great conversation.
Yes. And I appreciate your insights, and reach out, please, when you can with your fundraiser. I want to learn more.
Yes, thank you. It's still new, so I will be in contact about it. We're still putting it together. So yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet.
And again, and real quick, let me say that, I'm one of those people that I don't know if I'm permanently disabled or not at this point, but it's like maybe, and I'm figuring it out. But I can't go to protests right now for similar reasons. And I just want to say that these conversations are just as important, that the calling, sharing protests are just as important. Bringing the message of what people are doing on the streets to people who are being, brainwashed by the media is just as important. So I want to thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Okay, cool.
All right. So thank you, everybody. Go check out Justine at JustineBarron.com. Go check me out at whatever my website is, because it's not milensplain.com, but it will be shortly. And go give me some money, because I really need some money so that I can get milensplain.com back.
Give her some money.
Give me some money, please. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.